Well, good evening, everybody. Hey, what's happening? We got some bleed through with the background, don't we? With the old green screen. Looks like I might have to change the backdrop. Let's see. What should we go with? Oh, yeah. This will be good. Let's see. How about let's do that. All right, here we go. Yes, I know. You're happy to be back on the show, aren't you? You're very happy to be back on the show. Okay. Let's do this. Why don't we go? Oh, I like this. I like this. Oh, they're all so good. They are all so freaking good. How about this one? What's that size like? That's kind of cool. You're like, come on, man, just fucking pick one. Just get one, will you? Let's do this one. It's a little negative. I'm worried about your negativity. Here we go. Here we go. I like this. It's kind of colorful. It kind of matches. Let's make the switch. Let's make the switch. It's got a little artistic flair to it. Here we go. Yep. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm liking it. A little War of the Worlds. How about that? We'll do some War of the Worlds backdrop. That's a pretty cool poster, don't you think? That's from the 1949 movie. It looks like I have a ray shooting out of the side of my head. Have you guys ever seen this version of the War of the Worlds? It's really good. I think George Powell, yeah, there he is right there. George Powell produced it. And the special effects in this movie are actually pretty well done. Like the flying saucers look sort of menacing. And the fear is palpable in this movie, especially when they get the minister. And I don't know if he's a priest, right? But he's a minister. And he's got that cross and he's right in front of that saucer and he's saying the Lord's Prayer, right? Even though I may fear beyond the shadow of the valley of death, and then they vaporize him. Right? It's like, oh shit! They just vaporized the priest. This is serious now. This is some serious shit now. So they went from the radio show to the movie, and the radio show was a psyop, and a lot of people don't know this, but Edward Bernays and the Rockefellers were involved in the first War of the Worlds. That was done by Orson Welles and the Mercury on the Air Radio Theater. And part of what they were trying to do was they were trying to gauge the public's hysteria and their appetite for fiction. So not only was it a scary little production, but there was a purpose behind it. They wanted to see how malleable and how manipulable people could be. I'll tell you somebody who can't be manipulated right here. You cannot manipulate that. I'm telling you. This cat cannot be manipulated. She cannot be manipulated. Now, Jasper, on the other hand, Jasper wanted back into the Matrix. He wanted the blue kibble. He wanted back in the Matrix. But I said, no, you can't have it. You can't have the Matrix, Jasper. You're out. Okay. There's 102 of you here. Thank you for being here on this Sunday night. I know that you could be anywhere else with your time right now. So I appreciate your presence here. Truly. What do you think, Jasper? You gonna be part of the show tonight? Is this gonna be just the peachy show tonight? All right. Let's see who we have here. Mr. Benito Diaz. What's going on, Shadow? My man. Tomas Jordan. TJ's here. Not only is he here, but he's here. He's literally here. He's in the other room. He's not just here in the chat room. He's here in the living room. That's how here he is. We have a new Texan. I'm going to try and talk Tom into getting a mullet. I think that would be a really good Texan look for Tom. Meow Meow's here. What's that, Meow Meow? Integrity and Karma. All wrapped up in one yummy bundle. Integrity and Karma. Moon Sprout. What's happening, Moon Sprout? The whimsical farm girl. Ojos azules. ¿Qué pasa? Maya Rose is here. Scott Ayan as well. Sandy D. Clemens Bank. Pinka Feliz. I got a lot to say about Thomas Massie. A lot of it's astrological. Some of it's topical. I got a lot to say about it. Oh, wasn't expecting tonight. Piscean 2-4 splenic projector. So you are my opposite. Patricia just being me. I am a 2-4 splenic Virgoan projector. How about them apples? There she is, the lovely and talented one. Dr. Joan S. Taking care of all the little critters. God's little kingdom. Let's see who else. Misbehaving too. What's happening? Denise Walker from Tracy, California. Lewis Walden checking in from the Southwest Florida real estate market. What is happening in Southwest Florida? Claire, the lovely Claire, she was with us yesterday at our Astro Summer Sizzle, where I went over the headlines for the astrology over the next few months over on Locals. If you remember, you could attend that. You can attend the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Down the Wombat Hole. I love that. From down under. What's up or what's down, Wombat? Good to see you. Cash of the Masha. That green is spacey. Charlie, Peter Biome Freak is my brother, man. What's happening? There he is, Mark S. Mr. I don't even like to call what he does caricatures. It's beyond caricatures. How would I describe them? I don't know. They're almost like animated thought forms at times. He's got a new book he's putting together, and I've seen some of it, and it is top shelf, let me tell you. Let's see, who else do we have here? Nora Rashid, the Queen of Speed. Are you guys seeing the War of the Worlds or just the green backdrop? Let me see. Somebody's texting me. Creepy. No. Am I getting rain? Not yet. Hold on. But I am getting licked on by peaches. Let's hot. Maya says it's hot here in Mexico in every sense. Cartel everywhere shootings. We're going to take a look at Mexico's chart tonight. I have never looked at Mexico's chart before. But damn it, I thought it was high time, especially with the emergence of Claudia Sheinbaum. So we're going to take a look at that. Finca Feliz. What's happening when Kelly B is here? Who else do we have? Mo Harrison. Sunset pink and blue sky, Naples, Florida. Sounds like paradise to me. They just killed someone I know here in Mexico. Already 20 people. Same street. Jesus. That is not good. Not good. Thor at the door. My man Steve is here. Mary Lee. Okay, so Maya Rose is in Comala. So Maya Rose, I don't know if you know this, but one of my friends and favorite musicians of all time created one of my favorite albums of all time. And the name of the album is Comala. And his name is Jorge Reyes. I don't know if you know of Jorge Reyes, but he was a friend of mine. And to this day, I think Kamala is one of the most spectacular recordings I have ever heard. Ever. Let's see. It was Blue Beaver. Absolutely, Joni. On the money. War of the Worlds is terrifying, right? The first War of the Worlds movie, I mean, look, granted, I was maybe 12 when I saw it for the first time. I stayed up late. But man, for 1949, that's some scary shit. Let's see. There she is, C.C. Jones, the fantastic one. W.C. Ray, the 1927 Metropolis was, without a doubt. Without a doubt. This is an incredible movie. I remember the first time I saw Metropolis. It was life-changing. Life-changing. Robin Dan. Dan. What's going on, Robin? Good to see you. Oh, Christine Mose. Because she's too busy doing the manipulating. Oh, that's right. Peachy is a world-class manipulator. Yes, you are, aren't you? Yes, you are. William Powell's is here. If yesterday was your birthday, happy belated birthday. There you go. Let's see. Vox Clementas, technology, everything has been co-opted from the beginning. Probably make a case for that. You could probably make a case for that. I wouldn't have a problem with that statement at all. David Harmon, what's happening, brother? Good to see you. Has Jasper retired from YouTube? No, he's just sitting over here in the director's chair. I think he's playing hard to get. Sharon Lewis, who's here? They'll let you know. I had a mullet once upon a Robin. I think you'd rock a mullet. Just saying. Artist here, glad to be here. Daughter just had her beautiful baby girl. Right. Baby girl. Anything that reaches the masses is the first thing to me used as a weapon against the masses. That's pretty heavy. What if, however, What if somebody hacked the system and what reached the masses for the first wave was really something that was completely unintentional? Just throwing it out there. Just throwing it out there. So, do we know Claudia's moon? Yes, we do know Claudia's moon. Absolutely. That one's easy. Soleil, what's happening? We haven't seen Soleil in a while from down under. Good to see you. Curtis Moonflower. Me and Curtis Moonflower are going to get down to some weather report. Let's see. Who else do we have? The market is slow. Yes. Yes, the market is impacted everywhere. Platinum Happiness 2024, hanging out in Eastern Idaho. Cool. Secret Law 2007, let the Sunday night show begin. Indeed. There she is. We got a back-to-back cheeky monkey Benito Diaz sighting. Look at that. 1 2 1 2 1 2. So Tom passed me this brief documentary last night on Thomas Massie. And me and the good doctor watched it, and we were fucking blown away. Blown away by this documentary. And then I just started to send it to everybody. Watch this. You got to 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 watch this. And it's kind of the inside baseball on Thomas Massie in about 38 minutes. And it is the most condensed, concentrated sort of chunk of download you can get of somebody in 38 minutes and get a big dose of that person. Let's see. User 13 is here. Winter Rose, you're so excited. Oh. There may be no media that was ever non-partisan or geared for mass control, except for maybe shows like this. I mean, I think that there's always a vested interest, right? So if it was a TV show, it was whatever products were associated with the TV show, right? So they zero in on the demographic, and then they hone in on the demographic, and then they sell the commercial time. This is old school TV. So there was that. So that was like they're telling you, okay, we have a relationship here between the content and the product. I think in terms of just media in general, right? Like it has always formed the public opinion, no matter what it was. It always formed the public opinion, whether it was newspapers or billets or even satirical cartoons. Satirical cartoons, which we now basically think of as memes, were very popular during the French Revolution and put the ruling class in a terrible light. Right. So those cartoons were being used to propagandize the French Revolution and create the ruling class out as being demonic, piggish, you name it. Right. And in some cases, maybe they were, but in other cases, that ruling class was probably the one thing that kept the masses away from eventually what would happen in France. So, let's see. Who else do we have here? Norris, I just asked my buddy, how does Mexico elect a female Jewish lady for president? His response just now was, I don't know. We had a black president for 8 years. Are you referring to Obama? Is that the black president? Was he even really black? I don't know. Tucker Carlson was talking with Dave Smith, I think it was Dave Smith. Maybe it was Massie. I don't know. We watched the almost 3-hour interview with Massie too. And Tucker Carlson basically said if Obama was really who he said he was, right, like America's first black president, he wouldn't have settled in Martha's Vineyard after he left the White House. Like he would have gone back to Chicago, right? Like that's where he would have gone if he was truly that guy. But instead, he goes to Martha's Vineyard, which is about as far away from Chicago where he got his political feet wet. Let's see, was Tandar gave myself permission to wear baby's first shoes and separate from baby. I'm no way trying to. Okay, good. We don't want baby out there in the heat of the night. For some reason, you have my name written on the 8th of June on your calendar. That's because we did locals. You can always join us over there on locals. Who else you have? Thought tonight was a no-go. No, I just kind of got behind a little bit. Was watching some documentary. This is Peter on the Soviet atrocities during the communist. They're terrible. They're okay. If you do not have a weak stomach, I would suggest that you hunt down Eustace Mullins kind of blow by blow account of what happened after the Bolsheviks took over. But you better have a pretty strong stomach, because although a lot of you like read Kathy O'Brien, it's pretty dark. Like what the Bolsheviks did to the people of Russia, whether they were some degree of aristocracy or the Orthodox community, which they hated. I'm not even going to talk about it on here, right? But if you have any stomach for that, you want to see what could happen when the bad guys take over. It's like it's right up there with like fucking Pol Pot. They're one and one. They're right next to each other. Let's see. Lex, hey, what's happening, Lex? Hi back. Let's see. We're gonna get into all that. Okay. We are gonna get into all of that. I hope Hurley stays at UConn. So here's what I've heard. We'll just talk sports just for like a tiny second. Hurley's wife is from New Jersey, and apparently it's going to take a really big number. I know. Los Angeles, New Jersey, maybe Los Angeles 30 years ago. I don't know about Los Angeles now, but this is what I've heard. I've heard that if he waits long enough, he'll have the Knicks job and he won't have to move. So there we go. Can we have a moment of silence for the late Alex Jones? Is he off the air now? Did the signal go dark? Bodhicitta. It's always hard to tell what time your program comes on. It's usually around 6, but tonight I got a late start. Let's see. Hi, Susan Chappelle. Hello, Carly. Arlene Vega. What's happening? Half black. Yes. The whole Obama story is such a fucking enigma, isn't it? It's like, has there ever been another person elected president with such a, maybe Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton has kind of a weird past. Not as weird as Obama. Like really not as weird as Obama. Like to me, Obama is like the perfect Manchurian candidate. Let's see. Random thoughts, Peter. We need to put Jimi Hendrix's music on some kind of physical media in a time capsule, aside becoming catalyst, whatever it will be. Well, all you got to do is bury it, right? You just got to bury it. You got to bury it. You got to put it in something. Throw some CDs in there. Throw some batteries in there. Throw a little CD player, like from the we used to listen to back in the '90s. Those portable in the early 2000s. Those portable CD players that were good for nothing. They'd always skip. You get one of those, and you bury your time capsule, and you put a bunch of Jimi Hendrix stuff in there. That's what I would do. I knew someone who went to school with Obama at Harvard. Ooh. How about that? Yeah, that's because nobody knew about Columbia, right? He was like, "Oh yeah, I went to Columbia." They're like, "What? Who?" Wade Allen Root was there, and he said, "I never saw the guy." Obama in the vineyard, when he can pry himself out of D.C., is the first president to stay in D.C. All the easier to run things. I'll put that up there, user 13. That's worthy of a post. I heard they were worse than the Nazis. Are you kidding me? Not even close. The Bolsheviks were horrible. They're horrible. I'm not even going to tell you. I'm not even going to tell you. His chef's death could have been blamed on a drive-by in Chicago. Not that he had any trouble about murdering his private chef. I mean, Obama's gone pretty radio silent, hasn't he? I mean, I haven't seen any Obama lately. Maybe you guys have. I don't know. I'm not always looking out there looking for him. Hello, Melissa. Ryan Garcia arrest. Didn't he predict an earthquake that was going to happen 2 days ago? Man, you better be right about that shit. That's all I'm saying. Malice's white pill does a good breakdown of that situation. Shout out Michael Malice. Steve Borg Resistance is here. Let's go. No, you're not late. You're fine. You're on time. The murders in Martha's Vineyard are discreetly done behind well manicured hedges. And all. Yes, indeed. Very much. You could put it on a thumb drive. You certainly could. As many versions of media as possible. Why stop at one? Why stop at one? Let's see. Tondar, you're killing me. Biden went to Columbia. He was the first black student taught Obama to read. Oh my God. That might be the text tweet comment of the month so far. That's fucking hilarious. If I had a laugh track, I would play it right now. Oh my God. That is so fucking funny. Don't watch me while I'm doing Nazi stuff. All right, our eyes are off of you. Virginia Dare. What's happening? The atrocities are celebrated in a lot of their writings, of course. Yeah, they were oof. They were not nice people at all. Not nice people. Okay. All right, we're all caught up with the greetings and all that. So why don't we get into some astrology? Since you all have been patiently waiting. And I thank you for that. Like Mike Johnson is such a snake. You got to keep your eyes on Mike Johnson. I'm telling you. I am telling you. The Democrats love him. Yes, they do. Okay. He could be their candidate without even running. people are like, oh, what happens to Biden? What's going to happen if something happens? Like they're gonna trot that old truculent corpse out there. He's not a truculent. They're gonna trot him out there for as long as they can. As long as they can. Now, if for whatever reason something happens, look, they'll bump Kamala. They'll bump her up. They'll put her on the top of the card. And I don't know who they'll put under her. Because I believe they believe that they can do whatever they need to do in order to get the results that they desire. So they don't care. They really don't care who runs. All right. Let's see. Let's get into the chart of the moment. So that's where we are, boys and girls. We got a moon in Leo. Anybody feeling a little extroverted tonight? Speaking of Leo, I think Tuesday night I'll be going live with David over on his channel, His World. And we haven't done a live video together in a couple of years now. But we seem to have, found what's not that we never had common ground, but we found some very topical common ground over on Twitter. And if you weren't following last week's show, what I did is I put out a poll, and the poll was if an astrologer had recommended getting the shot, should their credibility be reassessed? And I think I got somewhere around 220 votes or something like that. And 92% of the people said yes. And of course, 8% said no, that they could still be good astrologers, even though they might have made a fatal error. So David saw it, took it, reworded it a little bit, threw it out there on his feed, almost got the same number of votes, which is kind of interesting because he has a lot more followers than I do on Twitter. And pretty much got the same result. I think his was 90-10, mine might have been 92-8. And, we started texting about it, offline. And he said, well, we got to do a live. What are you doing on Tuesday? I said, well, I don't have any plans. He said, well, you want to do something on Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening? I said, yeah, sure. Let's do it. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to time travel on Tuesday night, and we're going to go back into sort of the conditions that set up what happened in 2020. And then we're going to talk about 2020, and then we're going to talk about what the poll was about. And what was really interesting is that it didn't stop at astrologers. That there were people who were saying, well, it shouldn't just be just astrologers. It should be quote unquote healers. Because somebody, I forget who it was, had left a comment, and there was some person who was channeling, and whoever they were channeling said that it was safe. Well, that's really fucking dangerous, right? Like, who are they channeling? One of Satan's little henchmen? I mean, come on now. You're playing pretty fast and loose with the fuzzy channel there, right? So it became a bigger discussion. And look, if you didn't know, like if you weren't pot committed, you probably should have said, hey, look, I don't know what the right course of action is for anybody. Like, I am not a medical doctor. I'm not going to tell you how you should treat your body. Right. I'm going to leave that up to you. Right. Like, if you didn't have a position. Well, I took a very extreme position, and I'm not sorry I did. In fact, um I'm actually happy I did because I worked it out, right? I was working it out in real time and with astrology. And I brought this up on the uh, the locals get together on Saturday. Is that I have a background in journalism, so that's what I studied growing up. And I'm a published writer in various magazines, and I used to just write a ton on my blog, and I've been asked to write. Yeah. So anyway, so I was plugging in my journalistic skills, my research skills, the astrological stuff, right, and asking real time questions and not getting the real time answers that I needed. So we'll get to this chart in just 1 second. I just want to bring this one thing up. So one of the things that I did that I don't remember anybody else doing, but I looked at the first outbreak of quote unquote COVID, whatever you think of it, right? Whatever you think it was or wasn't. Right? I looked at the first outbreak here in the United States, which was in Washington State. And it wasn't just in a uh, an extended care facility, right? Or a home for elderly folk. It started to move outward from the epicenter of that state or of that place inside of that state. So I kept watching it, right? I kept watching it and watching like the numbers, in particular the numbers in Washington. And then I looked at the numbers in China. Now, of course, there's a much greater population density in China. But even accounting for the population density, if the spread of the virus, the quote unquote virus, was equal to the spread of the virus in China, even when you factor in the population density, after a certain period of time, it should have been parabolic in Washington state, and it wasn't. And so that really tipped me off that something was going on here, right? Because if we're looking for patterns, like that should have been the pattern, but it wasn't the pattern at all. So I'm like, okay, well, this doesn't fit this model. So the model is not correct. And as we went through the model, it became increasingly clear, again, based on what we'd seen previously, whatever you thought of what was happening in China, the model just wasn't matching. So then, of course, they brought in the PCR tests, and that's where everything turned, right? Once they turned up the volume on the PCR tests and they were able to get the junk DNA or the junk whatever, right? It was just measuring anomalous data. So it was the anomalous data that they were essentially classifying as COVID. But it wasn't. It was just the gunk that was showing up in the PCR because they were cycling this thing, 20, 30, 40 times. It was sort of like, okay, we're gonna find something in here. If it's not the first pass or the second pass or the third pass, we're gonna find something. And oh, lo and behold, they found something. Well, that something must be COVID, right? So now they had their proof because they had cases. They had cases, even though those cases weren't really cases. Then what did they need? They needed fatalities. That's what they needed. And if you're paying attention to the fatalities, they were changing the cause of death with a lot of people, right? You get into an accident. Oh, well, yeah, that's COVID, right? So now they've got their fate. So they were building their case. If you were paying attention, you can see, I'm probably getting in trouble on this, but you can see that a lot of this was hyper inflated and it was all there to put people into a state of fear. All of it. All of it. And then in comes the 6 foot distancing, right? Then comes the mass. And they just started to layer this one on top of the other on top of the other. And now I'm looking at this is just bullshit. We could just see where this was going, right? Not only that, but the astrology was there. The Saturn Pluto conjunction in January of 2020. That was it. That was the big power grab. That was the plutocratic, corporocratic power grab. The Saturn Pluto conjunction. They were all in once that happened. And you add all this stuff up, right? And it's like, well, why would you want to put yourself through this? Why would you want to put yourself through this? Well, why wouldn't you just wait it out or, look at some other alternatives, other remedies for whatever it is you're going through or what you might be going through, right? But oh no, they just shut it all down, put people in a huge state of fear. And again, I've told this story before, but the key thing to all of this was when people went to get toilet paper and they couldn't get it. That was all by design. Why? Well, it's because when you are an infant, we talked about this before, the first thing that you learn to do that makes you an entity separate from your parents, who at that point are doing everything for you, is you learn how to constrict your bowels and wipe your own ass. That is the entrance into the second house, which is the first chakra of the chart. Right? First chakra of the chart is the second house. So what happens? There's no toilet paper. Where does that throw people? It throws them right into their first chakra, puts them right into their anus, right? Puts them right back into that time where, as a little kid, and every little kid has had this, right? The uncontrollable bowel movement moment, right? And then who do you have to look towards? Well, you have to look towards one of your parents to help you out. Like, hey, man, I didn't get there in time or whatever, right? And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. It had something to do with hoarding, but I know for a fact that there were warehouses that were full of toilet paper. They just weren't getting to the supermarkets or wherever, right? Because they wanted to drop people right into their first chakra and make them solely dependent on the big daddy parent. That's what happened. And it got them right into their fear, right? Oh God, I don't have enough toilet paper. How am I going to wipe my ass? Right. And then, did you ever see any of the toilet paper wrestling matches? Here, some of those are epic, man. Anyway, but not fun. Saw a few on YouTube, of course. You put the stuff together, right? And it's like, okay, this is bullshit. This is bullshit. We gotta make a stand here. This is it. They're going all in, right? This is new fucking world order time, right? It's either now or never. We got to push back and we got to say no. And we got to do everything in our power to do that. That was my conclusion. And for better or worse, I was willing to own that. That was David's conclusion. For better or worse, he was willing to own that. And that was Eric Francis's conclusion. Eric Francis also comes from a journalistic background. And Eric and his group were crunching the numbers. They were doing the data. They were doing the research. And he came up with the very same analysis that I did, with his group in his own way. So in the astrological community, those were the only other people that I knew of that had taken a very strong stance. Now, I didn't know Cam White at that time, so I don't know where he was with it. And I know that everybody loves Cam White, and he's seems to be on the right side of, he seems to be on the right side of what we're talking about. And I know that Will Stick Evers was not down with it. And I've known William for a long time. I started connecting with William back in 2011, so I've known him for 13 years now. And that dude was not going to co-sign on that, right? So those are the only people that I knew of. I didn't know, I wasn't in communication with William, but I know that's where it was. But I was in communication with David, and I knew that that's what Eric Francis was doing. That was it, right? But if you weren't like that, if you weren't concentrated and willing to hold the line, then the best place would have been to be neutral. Like I was willing to be wrong because that's how I lived my life. Right? Like if I was going to do what I was saying to do or not do, like I was going to live that way, which I did. And wherever I went, I was like, fuck the mask. I'm not wearing the mask. It's not going to do it. Now, granted, I'm here in Texas. It was a little bit easier, but not always. You go into San Antonio and Austin, and they were fucking masked Nazis in those cities because of the mayors of those cities. And so I would go to those places fairly frequently. I didn't give a shit. Right? We just needed more people to assert themselves. And now all of a sudden there's this revisionist history and all these guys, well, I didn't really say that, or I knew that it wasn't a real law. It was just a mandate. It was unenforceable. Ooh. Anyway, Dave and I are going to get into that on Tuesday night. Can you tell? Can you tell that Leo moon is in the air? Getting a little square on with Mars. Look at that T-square. Mars, Pluto, moon. Fixed sign. Oh, this Mars, Pluto square. We're just kicking it off. Apparently some very heavy shit went down in Gaza today. I was doing a lot of traveling and errands. And so I'm checking the news every now and then. And supposedly today was the day that they quote unquote freed the hostages. And it was the sort of the bloodiest, most violent day since what happened on October 7th. Right. There's your Mars Pluto square right there. And do you think it's just going to end there? Do you think that what happened today is just going to be cauterized? Okay, we're good. We're done. No, it has repercussions. It has repercussions. And, we're headed towards a major moment in July 15th, 16th, 17th, when that Mars connects with that Uranus, which connects with Israel's sun in its natal chart, which squares all of its Leo planets, including Mars at the top. That is the collision point. That is the immovable object meets the irresistible force meets the immovable object. It is explosive, and it is all in a fixed sign. Right? Once what happens, it is undoable at that point. So all these things have ripple effects. Everything has a ripple effect. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, we loved to play with this idea of chaos theory. I actually got to interview Ralph Abram, who is the father of chaos theory. So the basic fundamental idea of chaos theory is that a butterfly flaps its wings in China and there's a storm in South Africa, right? That somehow the flapping of that butterfly's wings has an effect that ripples through whatever kind of non-local world we're living in, right? So it is entangled, and you think that, well, these two things they're not connected. Like, how could that happen? How could the flapping of a butterfly's wings in China be connected to a storm in South Africa? Well, there's entanglement, and then there's this idea of chaos theory, where it sets in motion a chain of events that winds up occurring somewhere else in the realm, and something connected to it but very different occurs as a result of that act. So when we get into a Mars-Pluto square, what we're doing or what's happening is it's setting in motion a very heavy duty um, canon of chaos theory, and um, for lack of a better term, dark entanglement. Right? These things have they're not isolated hermetic events that just occur, and that it's somebody else's um, bloody misery to worry about and to process and to somehow get over. Right? There are very intense, immediate ramifications for things like that. That have very little to do with this whole idea of chaos theory. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create a bunch of really pissed off fucking people. That's the most immediate effect. You'll create all these really, really angry people who, and for the most part, I would say that the Palestinian people, and look, I'm not here to talk about Hamas or the PLO or anything. I'm talking about the people who live in Palestine. And I know not everybody's perfect, but these people, in my estimation, are about as close to saint-like as you can get on this planet because of what they've had to endure over periods of time, over the last 20 years, right? Where they would go along and start to develop, and some weird little fucking missile would pop up on the other side, and they'd be shelled back to Middle Ages for a portion of Gaza, right? And they just keep living. They keep living. They keep having children. Like, at what point do you look around and say, why is this happening? Why am I doing this? Why am I here? Why do I even bring a child into the world if this is going to be their future? And yet they kept on doing it because they had hope in the future. They had hope. Having that child was an affirmation that their lives would exist, that they would continue to live on, right? That was their commitment to their legacy. That is the highest form of affirmation that I could ever see, is to have a child in conditions that are less than perfect like that. And I don't know. I think of what's happening to these people, and it's absolutely horrendous. So the immediate effect is that it's going to create more angry people, right? And even saints have their breaking points. So I guess the new plan is to move as many of them to the United States as possible. That sounds like a great idea. Not that I wouldn't welcome some saintly people into this country. Clearly, we could use a few more. But you don't always get the pick of the litter, right? So that's just one immediate effect. The other effects are going to be regional, right? They're not going to be immediate. They'll be regional. And from that place, right, out, they'll have like reverberating effects with other countries and other governments because of the interconnected nature of the relationships between these various groups. So in that regard, we can see the impact of that event, right? It's like you throw a big rock into the middle of a very still pond, and then you see the ripple effect of what this is going to occur. But then there's the things that we can't see. And that's where chaos theory comes into play. And that's where something that is seemingly unrelated occurs, but is somehow a energetic byproduct of the thing that happened to set something in motion. so that the outcome or the manifestation of that effect happens. And they seem very unrelated, but they're not. Right? That is chaos theory. So what we're doing here is we're creating both a tremendous amount of violence and tension in the area today. This is today, right? With Mars Pluto square. You'll read the headlines. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Today has been noted as the bloodiest day since October 7th. That is going to have a ripple effect. It will have a ripple effect. So one of the ripple effects is going to be presidential candidates. How does Robert F. Kennedy deal with that? You know, his stance has just gotten really weird. Like he calls the Palestinians pampered. That's not a word that I would use. Not a word that I would. You know, back in the old days of communism, when presidents would go to Russia, like when Eisenhower would go to Russia or Truman would go to Russia, they take them around and they had one church. It might have been an Orthodox church. They had one church that they had left standing just for that moment, right? So they could bring the people in and pretend that they were having a service. So they'd bring Eisenhower in, and there'd be Mamie and Dwight, and like, oh, well, these are religious people. They can't be half bad, right? And then after they left, shut the doors, and they would just keep it in shape for the next president or some other head of state, right? Like that was their little sort of Disneyland moment. And I have a feeling that some of that probably happened in Israel with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., right? So when he went, they took him to a really good part, right? Or a part that may have been, untouched, or it's kind of like, hey, let's keep this part of the strip clean. So if we have to bring anybody here, we'll take them here. Right. But the other stuff, if we have to dismantle it from time to time, right, we'll do that. So maybe that's what he saw when he saw that, they had high rises and, maybe there was the good part of the strip that they kind of left untouched, right? I don't know. How else could you say that they were pampered? So this is big right here. This is big, and it's going to get bigger, right? Just wait, right? Wait. July 15th, 16th, 17th. That's when Mars comes into play. I think you're going to have a lot of very impassioned response tomorrow. Maybe tonight. I don't know. Do they do the news at night somewhere on Sundays in this country? Because I tell you right now, tomorrow will be a hot mess. It'll be a real hot mess. And I guarantee you, Joe Biden won't be anywhere. He'll be nowhere to be seen. Who's the guy that they trot out there? I don't know the guy's name. He's always nervous. He always looks like he wants to leave as quickly as possible, right? At least Karine Jean-Pierre seems to get some sadistic joy out of being there. But they'll probably bring that guy out to answer questions. And it'll be interesting to see if they bring out Tony Blinken, picking and grinning Tony Blinken to answer questions. I think the media tomorrow is going to be hot. You're going to have people that are on the pro-Palestinian side and the anti-war side that will be very heated tomorrow. And you're going to have people on the pro-Israeli side, and they're going to come out swinging, right? Like they are always on the offensive, always. They never retreat. They're always on the offensive. They'll sing the praises of the men and women who, under extreme duress and life-threatening danger, rescued the hostages. Right, that will be the story. It'll be Entebbe 2.0. That'll be the story. So you'll have all these, courageous stories, right? And then you'll have some hostages who, of course, we don't know if they're hostages or not. Maybe they will be, maybe they won't be, but they'll have their story, right? It'll be that moon in Leo. It'll be that big moon in Leo, very expressive, over the top. So tomorrow should be just a huge cyclonic shit show when it comes to the media, because that's what you're going to get, right? That is what you're going to get. And you'll get, the snake, Mike Johnson. He'll come out and he'll support Israel. He'll support everything that went down, right? And they'll all say, oh, yeah, well, it's a good thing we gave them all that money because they were able to do this. Without all that money, we wouldn't have been able to do that. They wouldn't have been able to do that. We actually helped shorten it up, right? I mean, they'll use so much, just trust me. They'll use so much justification here. This thing is not over. It's only beginning, right? It is only beginning. And it would not be out of the question. And it pains me to say this. I don't like to bring this up because I don't like to peddle fear or doom. But after Monday or after today, it would not be out of the question for events to happen in this country that are very explosive and give us a heightened sense of danger and insecurity. Now, however those things go down, or whoever's in charge of them, let God decide, right? Or if you're really, really sharp, you may be able to figure it out. But it's very difficult now. Covering the tracks with these events is very sophisticated. Very, very sophisticated. It's not like the old days where they'd have an event and they'd blurt something out on the evening news with the first news report, and they would get shit wrong, right? But the shit that they got wrong, they actually got right. You had to pay attention because the details would slip through the cracks. So by the time they got to the 11 o'clock news, the story had already changed. Or by the time they got to the news the next day, the story had changed. Now they're running 3-4 different stages and scripts simultaneously. So you don't really know which one of the stages is actually the real stage. So it's gotten very sophisticated in terms of psychological operations. But to me, we're just getting into this very explosive period. Tomorrow the moon, creeps up on 1, and we're in that exact square tomorrow. That's right, PG. The exact square. So I would say that, we are, what's the word I'm looking for? We're in the tunnel, right? We are in the tunnel now. And the end of the tunnel is when all this is over. And I'm thinking 2029, 2030, right? Like when Saturn comes into Taurus, we've talked about this before. That's why they call it Agenda 2030, by the way. Saturn and Taurus, there's a new world, right? There's a new world, rises from the ashes, Agenda 2030. So we're on a competitive timeline with Saturn and Taurus. Finally, land, earth, grounding, emerging, late 2029. We're in the tunnel now. Maybe you could call it, the birth canal, if you want to be poetic about it in some ways. Having a baby can be really dangerous sometimes. Doesn't always go right. There can be complications. And, yeah, I know. You were a baby once. So we're in the top. The word that keeps coming to mind is gullet. I don't know why. We're in the gullet now. And I don't think there's any turning back. The volume just keeps getting turned up from this point forward. Because it all culminates theoretically on the 2nd of November with the election. Now, we've talked about this before. In the year 2000, Jupiter was in Gemini, just like it is now. And in the year 2000, we had an election that was challenged. There was theoretically no clear winner, right? Until all of a sudden, Florida raises its hands. We got a problem here. Yeah, that's right, Peaches. They had a problem. So Jupiter will be in Gemini again on election night. So buckle up, boys and girls. It's gonna be. We're gonna start hitting some turbulence. I've really enjoyed the Gemini energy over the last week. Loved it. Felt fast. Felt high level processing. Right. I really like that high level processing Gemini energy where it's quick and people like to use the word agile a lot lately. It's quick, it's agile, resilient. Isn't they always use those words? It's agile, it's resilient. But that's I would say it's more agile than resilient. But I've loved the energy the last week because it was really kind of an amazing conversation starter. Starting with those polls, and we have plenty of Gemini energy in the sky right now, all led by Venus. And I think that the Venus in Gemini is really good at inquiry and asking questions. So, well, what do you think about it? What do you think about it? What do you think about it? What are your thoughts on it? What were you thinking about when that happened? What were you thinking about when you told people to take that shot and your guy told you to? Were you even thinking? No, you were channeling, right? Venus in Gemini loves a good debate. I kind of got into a little bit on Twitter this last week. There's an astrologer. She's a good astrologer, quite a good astrologer, and I think she has her head squared on right politically. I like this person. She may even be listening to this. I like this person. And she was rolling with all this Gemini energy, right? Like, I know, I can feel it, right? She was having her own version of the Gemini Express. So she put a post up and basically it was like, okay, here we go. It's Pluto and Aquarius. And, there's all this new energy or all this new information that's coming into the world right now. So she did bring up the interview with Tucker Carlson and Thomas Massie, which was great, by the way. And then she brought up Terrence Howard and this guy, Billy Carson. And basically she said, it's, the baby boomers are hanging on. They don't want to let go of power, and it's just like, let's burn it down, let go, grab this energy and start all over. And I understand the sentiment. I totally get the sentiment. I am with her in spirit. Okay. But since this is just Gemini, the Gemini made me do it. And I said, well, okay. Well, what if somebody has the same kind of feeling that you do and has the same verbiage, but their version of the world is very different than yours? right? What if you're talking to Extinction Rebellion? And to, she didn't know what Extinction Rebellion was. And, she doesn't have to. But if you don't know what Extinction Rebellion is, it's like these group of people that basically want to destroy all technology. And they literally want to live in the dark ages. They want to live by tallow or, I don't know, beeswax or whatever, right? And they will glue themselves to paintings, or they'll be the people that will be in the streets on the crosswalks uh, while traffic's trying to get by, right? That's Extinction Rebellion. And so my line of thinking or rhetoric was, well, there are people that feel the exact same way that you do, only their version of it is very different. And how do you deal with that? Right. And she got a little frosty with me. And I get it. She was just trying to point out that, there are all these things. And, have you listened to Terrence Howard? And, there's all these great new ideas that are there and they're available. And I'm like, yeah, well, I did his chart and, Terrence is kind of interesting. He got most of his ideas from Walter Russell, which is true. Some people who are very smart take issue with some of Terrence's theorems, right? We looked at his chart and I said, hey, well, this is kind of interesting. But I'm not going to sit here and say Terrence Howard, is the melanated Tesla for the 21st century. I'm like, I'm willing to hear what the guy has to say, and let's see what other people have to say. The conversation starter, right? And Billy Carson, I don't know who's this guy. I know a lot of people like him. He's got some kind of space thing, forbidden knowledge, and I'm like, okay, cool, fine. Well, he's born in 1955. Well, do you know he was a boomer? And then I said, a lot of the things that we're using right now, legacy systems, were either built or maintained by boomers. And then she said, that's not true. And that's what these guys are talking about, that they all came from some other. Well, that's true. I mean, if you want to go into Tartaria, right, and look around and, we're talking about Aether and all these other, I get it. Like, I totally get it, right? But they didn't invent air traffic control the way that we invented air traffic control in the 20th century, which allows you to get on a plane and fly from one place to another, right? And to be able to maintain those systems. And even something like the internet, which was really built out in the 1970s and 80s when it was called ARPANET, right? Like, who was working on that? Like, that was, pretty much baby boomers, right? Baby boomers and some people that were born in the early 60s. They're all working on that shit, probably being supervised by people that, were post World War II. Those were the people that were building a lot of this stuff, right? So to summarily just trash everything that has brought us to this point where we can have a conversation about this and not agree about it, there had to be some people in between that played a role in all of it. And you may not like the boomers, right? But they played a role in this for better or worse, right? They did. They all did. Everybody did. You go back, it's like chaos theory. The unintended consequences sometimes of their own participation. And I just thought it was an interesting conversation to have. And here's sometimes, okay, I could be such a fucking contrarian. Like I do believe in this whole other world, this whole Tartarian scene. There's just too many weird things about it, right? It's like too fucking weird. Like, this is just this historically, these things have been buried right beneath our noses, and the orphan trains and the World's Fairs and all that stuff. Right. I totally get it. Totally get it. But I also feel like um in some ways it sells our own accomplishments short, because there are things that we theoretically we have accomplished. Then not everything is some kind of legacy tech from some other time, right? Somebody had to actually build something or invent something. Now, they may have piggybacked on something else, but it doesn't mean that it's the exact copy or replica of that thing. So I don't know. I was just sticking up for modernity a little bit. Since the moon is in Leo, we could have a little discussion about the boomers. We want to Pluto and Leo, and I feel like they're the they're the pinata right now. The boomers are the pinata, and I go back and forth on that whole topic, because on the one hand, it's sort of like, well, yeah, they had sort of the best seat in the house. Uh, they got fed first. They had kind of the best opportunities available to them based on the time of their birth and all of that is true, by the way. By the time the 70s roll around, and I'm coming into my teens, America's a fucked up and depressed place, right? Nixon's kicked out and Jimmy Carter has run the economy into the ground, and he can't fucking rescue a hostage from Iran. That's the world that I grew up in, right? That's the world I come of age in. It's not a lot of fun on that level. Inflation's at an all-time high. My father loses his manufacturing job, has to get a job in the service industry. Our family takes a big hit financially, huge ripple effect in our household, and not a good one, right? So I kind of lived through that, right? So I could see, like, okay, yeah, the boomers, man, they had the fat of the land. I totally get it. And I don't really hold it against them because of the world that we're in. I think human nature is human nature. Human nature is human nature. Now, Pluto will define a generation. It will definitely define a generation. My mother was Pluto in Cancer, and she was a tough old crab to the end. Her generation is like that. They're still around. These Pluto and Cancer people. You can't kill them, right? Most of them aren't vaccinated, or at least not recently, right? So they have really strong constitutions. So they have their own thing, right? Then Pluto and Leo has its own thing. The boomers have their own thing. Did they contribute to the mess? Yes. Of course they did. But every generation has its own, I think, responsibility in some ways, right? Like I became very cynical with politics, and I don't see myself as a boomer. I get some of the boomer backdraft a little bit, but I relate in a lot of ways more to Gen X, because I was a latchkey kid before the latchkey kids, right? I was the only latchkey kid in my neighborhood. All the other kids in the neighborhood had moms that stayed home. So they would go home and mom was there. And, I'd go home and there'd be this empty house. Right. And, when you're a little kid like that, 9 years old, and you're coming home, right? You open the door and there's, kind of nobody there. It's wintertime. And you're thinking, fuck, man, what do I do now? Okay. I know what I'll do. I'll turn on the heat and I'll turn on the TV. That's what I'll do. And that was it. It was the cathode glow and the central heating. And, that kept me in the game until my parents got home. But I do think, and for me, right, like with my generation, I just became very cynical. And I think to myself, well, what if I had become involved in politics earlier? What if I had looked around and said, this is pretty fucked up. I need to do something about it. But I didn't do that, because when that was happening, like, politics was not cool. It really wasn't cool. Like, Reagan wasn't cool. Like, if you were into Reagan, you were into conspicuous consumption, and you wore Izod collared shirts, right? And it was just like, there's nothing there, right? And then the one guy who kind of made sense, but got very little airtime was Pat Buchanan. And let's face it, smart guy on the right side of most of these issues, paleoconservative. Pat Buchanan always came off as grouchy. He was always grouchy. He wasn't like smart and witty and funny, although he could be, but he was always on the defensive, right? Because he was the only guy that was kind of standing up for the. So politics was just not an option. It was, and they kind of made it that way, right? So my thing was like consciousness, but the boomers got in, and they're presidents, and they've had three now. They've had Bill Clinton, they've had George Bush, and they've had Donald Trump, all boomer presidents. Joe Biden is not a boomer, by the way. He is part of the silent generation, and he's getting more silent every single day. Am I right? Like pretty soon, there'd be nothing coming out of Joe Biden's mouth except drool. So the boomers have had three cracks at the presidency. Very mixed results. 8 years of George Bush was not good for this country. It might have been great for the military-industrial complex. It might have been great for the neocons. It was not good for the country. 8 years of the Clintons, not good for the country. Not good. And Trump, those 4 years were torture. Let's be honest. They were torture. We wanted more. We expected more. So the three boomer presidents, the one guy who represented my age group was fucking Barack Obama. And, it's like, oh, great. This is, we're just going to skip right over this. Right. Because the next person, if we ever have another president, besides whoever's next, will probably be Gen X. And that's Thomas Massie, by the way. Gen X. We're going to get into Thomas Massie in a moment. Let's finish this up. I'm sorry. I went on a bit of a tangent. I think every generation has some skin in the game for the blame. Do the boomers have the most? I think at this point, they're the ones with the biggest targets on their backs because they have houses, they have disposable income, they have the things that other generations don't have, right? Like some of Gen Z, boy, it's storming here. Some of Gen Z and some of the millennials are not happy with kind of where we are, what's been left on the table. By the way, that doesn't have a lot to do with the boomers. That has a lot to do with the current government and making it very difficult for people to buy houses and the inflation. And the inflation, which started, unfortunately, with the omnibus bill during the Trump administration that basically bailed out all these businesses during COVID and allowed people to stay at home. Big part of the inflation has to do with that, right? So could we help these people? Absolutely, we could, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Is it going to be a big part moving forward? No, because they don't want people to own property. That's where it's at, right? They want people to live in their, little green cage in their megalopolises while the rest of the country is cordoned off for green zones, right? When I say green, that means you don't get to go there. So you can blame the boomers for the housing situation because they have them and they maybe have more than one. But I don't know if you can blame them entirely because the system, working with people like BlackRock and Blackstone and all these other companies, have decided to be the major real estate holders in the country. Okay, so you can take it up with those people. Do the boomers have some blame? Sure. I think they do. But again, we all do. I could have gotten involved earlier if I hadn't been so fucking cynical. Right? I think we all have sort of some skin in this game, and now we're all waking up. And it's like that Spider-Man meme, where there's the three Spider-Men or whatever, the two Spider-Men, they're like, which one is which, and who do I shoot my web at? That's where they've kind of gotten us at this point, which is, I think it's unfortunate. I think it's really, and I think, if any generation made a mistake, they should just, come right out and fucking say it. So yeah, I fucked up here. Let's get it together. Let's get past this. If we're going to move forward and not burn the place down, and maybe we should figure out how to get along. We'll get into that with Thomas Massie. All right, let me get back to the astrology. It's all the Gemini. It's made me chatty. What else do we have here? Sun square Saturn. It's raining right now heavily. There's a major storm. There's some major Neptune square going on right now in this part of the world. But Sun square Saturn, again, this is a brief transit, but coming into Monday, that Sun will still be in square with Saturn, right? It'll be at 20 degrees tomorrow or late 19, and people aren't happy. People are still questioning authority. Here comes Mercury right behind it. Mercury catching up to the Sun. 6 days from now, Mercury's going to square Saturn. Like, if we don't start getting answers to the questions that we're asking about what happened in 2020, it's going to start to get real uncomfortable. Real uncomfortable. Because what started last week with Marjorie Taylor Greene, that's not going to go away. You could see it in the astrology. It's right here. It's right here. It's questioning authority. So where are we? Sunday night? All right. So I would say by Thursday, Friday. So tomorrow will be 14 degrees. Okay, so Tuesday 15, Wednesday 16, Thursday 17, Friday 18. Now, generally, the conversation gets kind of dull on Fridays. It gets spicy during the week. So I'm going with Thursday here as Thor's Day, thunder and lightning, and heavy debate. Heavy debate about what went down. Pluto is retrograde in Aquarius, right? It's taking us back. It's moving backwards. It'll eventually go into Capricorn. Pluto, now remember this is really important, right? When COVID hit, theoretically, where was Saturn? 0 Aquarius. 0 Aquarius. Where's Pluto moving back to? 0 Aquarius. So we're literally going back to that time where Saturn was, when, it was like the universal lockdown. So there's a lot of chatter, and a lot of that's not good enough. That answer is not good enough. Not good enough. We also have Venus coming into square this week with Neptune. It's already kind of there, right? 8 degrees. The closer it gets in there, the more slippery it gets. It's when deals get made. Slippery deals get made. It's going to be really interesting, right? Because on the one hand, you have this Venus square going on with Neptune, right? And it's slippery contracts. And maybe some of them will be exposed because Mercury square Saturn. So we're looking at things with a really sharp eye, right? Mercury Saturn square, it will sharpen the edge of the mind. Like if you have a Mercury Saturn square in your chart, you will get sharper as you get older, because that's what it does, right? That's what that 90-degree angle does. It sharpens the blade. It doesn't dull the blade. It sharpens the blade. So it's going to be very interesting, where we have a week of backroom deals and promises, right? And then we have people that are not willing to take no for an answer. It's going to be a very interesting week. Very interesting week. And again, with that Mars-Pluto square in the background, super, super explosive. And then tomorrow, of course, the moon in Leo. And you'll have just people grandstanding, right? They'll either grandstand or there'll be all kinds of hand-wringing emotion. And some of it, I think, probably justified, honestly. What else we got going on here? Man, it is really raining. Let's talk a little bit about Palace, which we've talked about before. And Palace is all about pattern recognition, and it's retrograde, right? So we're looking backwards and we're seeing the patterns. Like, what were the patterns? What was going on at that time? We're using hindsight, or we're kind of traveling through time with Palace retrograde in Scorpio. And it's also, I think, really important to find out where the money is, right? Where did the money come from? Where did the money come from? This is a big deal with money right here. The other thing too is also this Ceres retrograde in Capricorn, which I talked about, because Ceres is all about nurturing and it's retrograde. So we have these planets that are retrograde, and Ceres does have to do with health. And Capricorn is the system, right? It is the government. And we're looking at, so it's really interesting to look at this through the lens of Fauci, the biggest fucking liar in the world. Like, I haven't met anybody who could lie like Fauci. It's incredible. I mean, there are just example after example of the things he said in this, and he said, I never said that. And it's so bizarre. The only thing I can think of, this is the only thing I can think of, is that maybe this is like a Fauci clone or something, right? That it's not really Fauci. And then he could actually say that he never said that, because that version of that guy never said that. That's the only thing I can think of. That is the only thing that I can think of, that they can trot him out there and he could say it with an absolutely straight face. I never said that. I never said it. I could do a Fauci, but I'm not going to. But we're looking at it, right? We're looking at prima facie facts on the table. What was said, what wasn't said, what was followed, what wasn't followed. And it's all connected to Capricorn. It's all connected to the system. In all of these minions of the system that were all in lockstep and following orders and telling you what to do for your own good, or threatening you, or turning your family and your friends against you and encouraging them, right? All the way down the line. All the way down the line. It's a time of reckoning coming. And we may be very close to it. We may be very close to it. Because Gemini is just that energy that flips things around. Right? And that square with Saturn just will not take no for an answer. Won't take no for an answer. I think we're going to see something in the media, in the that is going to blow the whistle on a deal. Like, this Venus Neptune square is really interesting. Really, really interesting. And it's kind of like, uh-oh, we can't talk about this now, right? It has that kind of effect. But I'm not sure it can go away unless there's another distraction. That brings us back to the Mars-Pluto square and the after effect of what happened today. All right. So what about for you? What does this all mean for you? Well, with Gemini, hey, look, keep asking the right questions. Keep asking the right questions. Keep having the the right kind of dialogue. I would say that you don't always have to be right. Although with the moon and Leo, I think that's a lot of people want to be right with the moon and Leo. So as the moon starts moving through Leo, it's going to start to sextile all these Gemini planets. So you say, aha, I was right. I was right. I was right. Victory lap, right? You could do that. But I think you should engage. Like there's just so much potential for communication. Even if the questions you ask are difficult ones. Like don't give up. Don't give up in the dialogue. The thing I do like about this Leo moon, especially as it comes in sextiles Gemini, it's a lot of fun. Like it's a lot of fun. And you can see that's the one thing about our experience here is that everything can be so serious. And it is. We live in very serious times. But I think it's important to have some fun every now and then. And, enjoy yourself every now and then. I know it's really just kind of, minor, but I did this new intro for 15 Minutes of Flame that I roll over on Rumble. And I took a Chinese martial arts movie and I dubbed in my own dialogue. Right. I'm like, I want to have fun with this. I want to put a smile on people's face. That's what I want to do. When they see this, I want them to laugh. And I think that energy is in the air early on. Like even right now, we have that moon sextile to Jupiter, and that could be another signal. Hey, it's heavy out there. It's dark. It could always be worse, right? I mean, really, it could always be worse. No, seriously, make light of the situation. Make light of the situation. One of the signs I saw one of these short videos on YouTube. And one of the signs of people that have a really high IQ is that they have a good sense of humor. So I know a lot of you, hell, I'll say every single one of you are smart. So you're all capable of cracking a joke or having a good sense of humor. And you'll even see that with Thomas Massie. He's very funny. He does a killer impersonation of Trump and Mitch McConnell. So don't forget that, right? Like tomorrow night, going into Wednesday, try to have a little fun. Engage a little. Be playful. There's plenty of heavy. There's plenty of heavy going on. If you can make somebody smile or laugh, it's great. Spend some time around kids too. Like that's really great kid energy. Gemini, Leo, right? It's really youthful, really playful. It's also really good for pets, dogs, cats, just get some of that energy, right? It's available. Get some of that playful, youthful, puck-like energy. All this other stuff is going to be in the mix, right? You can, the thing about astrology in life is that you don't have to be locked into one thing, right? You can experience lightheartedness and playfulness in injecting humor into a situation. And later in the day, you can ask some very serious fucking questions, right? These are not mutually exclusive states. And that's the beauty, I think, of us as humans, is that we have such a wide array, a wide spectrum of where we can check in on anything. And there's probably even a greater spectrum beyond which we're even aware of that we can check in. So we don't always have to like be one thing and have tunnel vision all the time. This Jupiter Pluto trine is still happening. Did anybody make any money on GameStop? I wish I'd gotten in on that. It had Jupiter Pluto trine. Like Gemini rules, games and puzzles and all that shit, right? Didn't Nancy Pelosi make a shit ton on GameStop? All right. Let's get into our guy, Thomas Massie. Then we're going to get into Claudia. And then we're going to get into Mexico. Okay. All right. I do not know Thomas Massie's time of birth. So I'm having to spitball this thing a little bit here because I know a little bit about his life. When you see the documentary, if you see it, Off the Grid, one of the things that you'll find out about him is that he is really connected to the earth. First of all, he's a Capricorn, but he has that Saturn in Taurus, and he's a builder. And he built this home from everything on his land, whether it was trees or rocks, he did it all. And there's not one nail in the house that he's built except for the nails that nail the foundation to the frame, and that's it. Everything else is notched and wooden pegged. And he just uses everything that's available around him to create this incredible house on his own. And so when you dig deep on Tom, so I'm going with Taurus rising. Okay, because he reminds me a little bit of a Taurus rising. He's got a bit of a, and this is by no way like demeaning at all, but he has a little bit of a snout face in some ways, right? I'm not demeaning at all. I was thinking, okay, is he Cancer rising or Virgo rising or Taurus? I went with Taurus, and there's a reason why I went with Taurus rising. So first of all, you know that when you watch the video, that his home is everything, and I thought the moon has to be in his fourth house, and it has to be in Leo, right? Because that's where his moon is, and he put all this effort into building his home, like just incredible amount of effort. And he wanted to raise his children, in the area that he grew up in. He was born in West Virginia, but he grew up in Kentucky. And Thomas Massie is really fucking smart. He's got an IQ of 180. And when he was a kid, they didn't have TV. I don't think they had TV because they lived out in the country. There weren't any movie theaters nearby. So he built shit, right? He built things. And one of the first things he built was his grandmother liked to travel. So he built her a self-watering pot so that when she went away on vacation, the pot would water itself. He's got like 23 patents. He's got an IQ of 160. He started his own company. And he started it while he was at MIT. When he was a kid, he never even saw MIT. He just heard about it and thought, well, that'd be a great place to go to school. And he got a scholarship there. And he took his high school sweetheart to MIT with him. And that's where they started their business. So what I did here is I looked at the seventh house where he has Venus, Neptune, Jupiter, Mars partnership, right? Big time partnership. And I thought, well, that would make sense that he would have this very intense bond and partnership with his wife, but it would also be a business relationship and a business partnership, which it has been. And so I went with Taurus rising. And even with how he's had to take on responsibility, and it puts his son in Capricorn near the midheaven. So one of the things that was really interesting about Massie is that he has this company and he creates a virtual reality company. And it's like this object oriented virtual reality company, and he creates this technology that I think is for either people that are handicapped or they can't see, one of the two, right? He creates this thing that is not just, oh, I don't know, some kind of program that can um, predict, somebody who has defaulted on their loan and another company's bought that loan, right? And they didn't create a software program to essentially rate the candidates so that you could go to the top of the list because they're the ones most likely to pay. And then work your way down to the bottom, which is, hey, good luck, right? I actually know somebody. I met somebody who did that. He didn't do that. He actually created a product that helped people. So he did this in Massachusetts and he got all the startup money and he didn't want to live in Massachusetts. So they lived in Vermont. And they said, look, we either stay here and do this or we sell the company and we move to Kentucky back. And that's what he did. He moved back to Kentucky, right? Cancer on the IC, Moon in Leo. There's the South Node conjunct Leo. So he has, with that South Node, like really powerful emotional values that he's, bringing to his life and to his world, right? Hey, we're back. If I had Thomas Massie's off the grid system, I could have kept going. I don't know where I lost you guys, but I put his chart up here. So this is what I've been talking about for the last 10 minutes. Thomas Massie's chart. And one of the things that I said was how he basically has taken on responsibility. He never wanted to be a politician. He just wanted to live free, right? He wanted to live off the grid, literally off the grid, build his own house, have his own food. I'll take care of my business. You take care of yours. Of course, the local government likes to get into everybody else's business. And he eventually wound up speaking at at like a council or supervisors meeting. And he got up and spoke. And one of the guys said, "Okay, Mr. Massey, your time is up." And the guy behind him said, "I'm going to yield my 5 minutes to Mr. Massey." And everybody else that night did the same thing. And Thomas Massey spoke the entire meeting. And by the time it was over, whatever they wanted to do to put more limitations on their land, use of land, etc., he had won. Right? He had won. He had turned the tide. And eventually he wound up becoming like a county supervisor, right? Like he was in charge of the roads and the bridges and all that kind of shit. Trash. And eventually that led to running for Congress. And it was the same people, all the same people all along have been with him. Right? He's incredibly loyal. And he just wanted to return to his roots in the place that he grew up. And he wanted to create a place for his children, his children's children. This guy's really, Thomas Massey's the real deal. He's the real deal. And he's also, he's a bit rebellious in his own way, right? He's got that Sun Uranus square. So he's a little rebellious. Nobody's going to tell him what to do. And he's uber Capricorn. When you went back to the omnibus spending bill that Trump wanted to push through, he drove 8 hours. You cannot, if there's one person on the assembly, on the floor, then they have to meet. Right? This is during COVID. He drove 8 hours from Kentucky to DC, and he waited in his truck for basically 3 days and lived off of peanut butter pretzels. And he caught a ton of shit from all these people because he was forcing them to come to DC and be present and vote on that bill. Right? It wasn't just going to be a signature, and Trump gave him a lot of shit for that. So he's rebellious, right? Nobody's going to tell him what to do. Ain't going to happen. Right? And I think what's really interesting is this junction in Scorpio. And so one of the things, of course, we have a sextile to Pluto, right? So, man, is he good with resources? He's incredibly good with resources. This guy's got a will, right? Mars, Jupiter, and Scorpio, look out. No project is too big for him. So this is how rebellious he is. He wanted a Tesla battery to run his solar off of in his home because he knew that the Tesla battery was the best battery that he could get. And he had, he tried to buy one from Tesla and they wouldn't sell him one, but he didn't want to buy a whole car. So he found one. He found a wrecked Tesla in Tennessee, and he drove out there and he picked it up and he brought it back, and he used the battery from that Tesla to be the main battery for his house, right? So he found a workaround. It's like, hey, you don't want to sell me a battery? I'll go find a wrecked Tesla and I'll use that battery. He's really remarkable. Like, where there's a will, there's a way with this guy. And that's, to me, that's the Mars Jupiter conjunction. Oh shit! Now I gotta fucking back out of here now. Son of a bitch. Okay, sorry for the delay. It is turgid and let me get back to Massie. Massie attack. Okay. Does he have any weaknesses in his chart? That's the question that I'm asking. And I would say no. He's got the Jupiter moon square. Like, I think any square you have with Jupiter, you think big. Like you go big, right? Go big or go home. And that's kind of what he did with his build out in Kentucky. I don't think that's a weakness, actually, especially if you have the ability to carry through. What I find interesting is this Mercury in Sagittarius at 29 degrees. And we know the Mercury here, right? But it sees the big picture. And I almost think that it's better here at 29 degrees because there's it's kind of like a blank slate in some ways. It doesn't have that kind of, you know, fiery, rhetoric that an early Mercury in Sagittarius would have. Like there's nothing there, right? But we know that Mercury in Sagittarius is all about the big picture. And it's in a fucking tight square with Pluto, 29, 29. So what's this guy going to do? He's going to ask the hard questions. He's going to ask the hard questions. He's going to dig. He's going to research. I love that he buys anytime he buys a book on something, he buys 3 on the subject because he says between those 3 books, you'll get the entirety of the subject. And he taught himself how to do the house. He bought a course off of eBay for $500 and went to Tennessee for a week and learned how to do it. To me, that's just Saturn, right? That's Saturn and Taurus on the ascendant. Again, if we're in the rectification sort of area of the chart. And the other thing that I think is really interesting about Massie is that true node in Aquarius because he's technological, right? Like he's really technological and he's not afraid of solar power at all. Like this guy is truly a real environmentalist, not a fake ass bullshit carbon capture, net carbon zero credit, climate pusher. No, he's a real environmentalist. You watch the documentary, you'll see what I'm talking about. He's not afraid to go against the grain with that true node in Aquarius. And he says that he has relationships with everybody on Capitol Hill. And he says, I go over and I talk to the squad all the time. I talk to AOC all the time. I'll say, hey, in that regard, like when you hear him talk, there's not a lot of venom in Thomas Massie. Right? This is a very evolved person. Right? He's got a Sun Saturn trine. He's got a Sun Pluto trine. The guy's an adult. He's an adult. And he's Gen X. Gen X, hello, this is your guy. Right here. Right here. This is your dude. And Tucker Carlson's 2 years older than he is. Tucker was born in 1969. So he's another Gen X guy. And they were like, they were like his roof. They were lock and groove, right? Notch and groove. That's what they were in the interview. He also has Pallas and Pisces. You know what he says? He says, water is everything. Water's the key to everything. If you don't have water, you're screwed, right? That's Pallas and Pisces, but he's also psychic, right? He has this kind of ability to, sense what's coming. And it's very different, Pallas and Pisces and Scorpio and Cancer. They're all about sensing and pattern recognizing, but they're going to be different, right? Pallas and Pisces almost feels religious in some ways, right? Like here, like like the voice of God, or the voice of an angel, or something very inspired. To me, that's Pallas and Pisces. And when I think of Thomas Massie, and I think this chart plays this out. I'm not just hyping it because I really like the guy. He reminds me of a founding father. And he reminds me of a founding father without the elitism. Like he's Jefferson without the elitism. He grew up out of that Kentucky soil, right? That soil is in his body. He drank from the water of that land. He ate from the plants of that land, right? He probably even, swallowed some of the dirt on a dirt bike ride around the land or whatever, right? It's in him. And I love this guy. I think this dude should be president because he is irreproachable. He cannot be bought. He can't be bought. And he's kind of nerdy too. That's the other thing about him. And he wears this this debt calculator that's always going. And he wears it on his chest. And again, it feels very Saturn and Taurus to me, right? It's like always reminding people about, how much is being spent. I think the in conjunct with Uranus to Saturn is very interesting because it feels like he has some really ahead of the curve ideas that he still has yet to implement, right? Like Uranus is that back end, and Saturn is, okay, how do we make it work? How is it practical, especially in Taurus? And Uranus back there is like, it's the scientist, it's the mad scientist in the laboratory. And he looks a little bit like a mad scientist in some ways. It's interesting because he's theoretically would be, Pluto and Libra, but it looks like Pluto in retrograde. So he's got a 29 Virgo. Maybe that's why I like him. It's Pluto's conjunct. This is a dude that I can say without a shadow of a doubt, real deal. He's the real deal. And, I'm just going to affirm that nothing is going to happen to this guy because we need Thomas Massie. And I don't say that about many politicians, but we need this guy. And he's young. He's born in 19. He's just coming in. He's just coming into his own power, right? He's just in 2021, he went through his Chiron return. Like he's ready to rock. And Saturn's going to come in here and start to trine Mars and start to trine Jupiter. And, it's just going to go on a run, right? When he goes into Aries, it's going to start to trine his Sagittarian planets. And I think he's got a lot of humanity. With that Chiron trining Venus and trining Neptune, right? And even trining Jupiter, he has a lot of humanity. And and he says, I love people. He says, I really love people. He says, not everybody loves me, but and when he says that, you really get a sense that it's true, right? It's so funny. Like I saw somebody say that, there was a comment that he was a rhino, not in chat, but it's like, Thomas Massie's he's the least fucking rhino you'll ever find. Why? Because he votes with AOC, because he voted against 2 spending bills, huge spending bills. And he was not in on replacing Kevin McCarthy. He said, at least not at that time. That was all a setup. That was a total setup. Anyway, There's your chart for Thomas Massie. I think it's a hell of a chart, and he's a hell of a guy, and we need a lot more of Thomas Massie's. And Gen X, come on, Gen X, he's your dude. It's one of your dudes. Rally behind him. He's got that Capricorn sun at the magical 22 degrees. All right. Let's go from the top of the mountain to the valley below. Claudia Sheinbaum. Claudia Sheinbaum. I could see why somebody asked me about her moon. It's an interesting question because at 12:20 p.m. that moon is at 29 Pisces. After 1 p.m., 2 p.m., it's in Aries. So that's a really good question about her moon. So let me tell you why I picked this time for Claudia Sheinbaum, who was born on June 24th, 1962 in Mexico City. First of all, she looks to me like a Virgo rising. You know, she's got that tight ponytail, right? She's all together. Like she just reminds me of a Virgo rising. There are younger pictures of her where she clearly looks different than that. But I thought, okay, let's roll with Virgo rising and see where this takes us. One of the things that also brings us into the discussion around Virgo rising is where Saturn shows up in her chart, and it's in the 5th house with the South Node in Aquarius. And she has a child, right? One child. Now, I may be speaking out of the stereotypical side of my mouth, but generally Mexican families are larger than just one child. I think even in her own family, she has more than like her birth family, where I think she has some brothers and sisters. She, by the way, is not Hispanic. She is Jewish on both sides of her family line, both her maternal line and her parental line. And her parents were going all the way back to her grandparents. They were all very instrumental in the Mexican Communist Party. So I have Saturn in the South Node in the 5th house because of difficulty with children. And she managed to have one. So I'm just kind of going with this, right? And the other thing that I was looking at in this chart is like what's going on behind the scenes with her. Power behind the scenes. So for me, I thought, well, Mars would represent power in the 8th house, right? And then Pluto would also represent power in the 12th house. So that kind of lines up. She was educated at UC Berkeley. So that means that she was educated abroad outside of Mexico. So that means I put her Mercury in the 9th house in Gemini, which is college and studying and abroad, right? So this is kind of how I got to the rectification. And again, it is clearly not perfect, right? And she may not even be a Virgo rising, but these were the things that I were looking at in terms of physical type, the things that she believes in, environmental causes and blah, blah, blah. And then, the power behind the scenes, And with her son, right up there, conjunct the midheaven. Now, she has a grand trine, right? She has a sun, Jupiter. It's a wide grand trine, but she has a grand trine, 10 degrees, so it's very wide. Sun, Jupiter, Neptune, grand trine, right there. Right. If we really wanted exact. Yeah, that'd be about it. Yeah. Um, so even though it's wide, it's pretty powerful. And we're dealing with water in terms of like her, how she operates. She's mental, she's smart. This is not somebody who is clearly unintelligent. She has Mercury and Gemini. So she's going to be, she's bright, right? We know that. She's got a degree from Berkeley. Um, but she has some challenges in the chart as well. And I think the biggest challenges are with Neptune. So let's look at those challenges. She has a Venus Neptune square in her chart. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. And I said, that's like one of those squares where there's deals. I thought about, deals that are exposed, especially with all that Gemini behind the Venus Neptune square. But clearly, this is not a person that keeps their promises. I'm telling you right now. Not that they're a liar, but she doesn't keep her promises. The Venus Neptune squares are they're they're pretty loosey goosey, right? They'll agree to one thing and they'll do something else completely different. And she has this true node conjunction with Venus, which is quite interesting, actually. Right. So she's all about, female power, woman power. If you see pictures of her when she's younger, she's actually, pretty hot. Like she's got some, really sexy pictures. Not, I mean, I'm not making a value judgment on her appearance now. Okay, so let's okay. So even though she has all this background, with all these committees and she was like the mayor of Mexico City. So she has a political background. She studied at Berkeley, got her degree in basically, green shit, right? Basically green shit. I think she's an actress. That's what I think. Like when you get into this Venus true node conjunction in Leo, she's an actress. Like she's playing a part. And I don't mean this to sound demeaning or condescending to people in Mexico who look up to her. And if there are some of those people, I think she's an actress. I think she's playing a role just like Justin Trudeau is playing a role, just like Emmanuel Macron is playing a role, just like Maloney is playing a role. They're all actors or actresses. And in this case, it's clear that that's what she's doing. She's acting and she's acting in a role and somebody is directing her movie, right? Who's directing her movie? It's Saturn. Saturn's directing her movie right down here in the South Node. What's interesting about this is that she's got some unfinished business around responsibility and leadership. And it's it's kind of bound up in Aquarian or Aquarius. So, but I think in this regard that it's she's not the one that's leading. I think she's taking the orders from Saturn right here. And but I think she's okay with it too, because whatever those orders are, or whoever is dispensing, the green agenda or whatever it is, right? Like that's the same as being a director in a movie. And that's why I say she's an actress with that Venus conjunction with the true node in Leo. That could also be very charismatic. And whether or not the moon is in Aries or Pisces at the end of Pisces, that's going to come in and trine that Venus, right? So she whatever, whatever you think of her, right? There's a part of her that has some kind of career. There's got to be somebody in Mexico that likes her because she has some kind of charisma and appeal. Maybe she's one of these people who might be more popular outside of Mexico, right? She might become an international celebrity because of some whatever's going on here, right? Now, if this time is remotely true, and I'm just going with the Virgo rising, puts her son in the 10th house, and she's now the president of Mexico. I would expect somebody like Thomas Massie's son was over here. Her son is there, right? So you would expect somebody who would be in a position of power or in the public eye to have a 10th house son. Oh, there he is. He is not retired. Not retired. He says, I got a 10th house son. But I think this chart is problematic. It's the deals, right? It's the deals. And I think there are deals that can backfire on her, truly backfire on her. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when she has her Mars return in the next couple weeks. I wonder, right, if there would be an attempt on her life. Now, I'm not saying that she would die, but I wonder if there would be an attempt on her life. And the attempt on her life would be staged, right? It would be scripted somehow. And that she would escape or evade it, right? Like a near miss or near hit, rather. Um, I wonder if that would drum up a lot of sympathy, wouldn't it? Like president of Mexico nearly escapes death. It'd be almost one of those mythical kinds of ways to start a presidency or a legacy. Because I have to look at that Mars return and then the square, right, with Uranus, which again tends to be rebellious and I think also quite violent. Um, that'll be interesting. Keep your eyes on her over the next 3 or 4 weeks and look out for either plots against her or things that are supposed to uh, be deadly and don't happen, right? Like a total fail. I could see that because that would garner sympathy, wouldn't it? Like straight out of the gate, that would garner sympathy. And I could see that with a Mars return and squaring Uranus. The other thing with this chart is the Neptune Saturn square. And again, I think that this would be somebody who would break the rules, bend the rules, not follow the rules for power. And I also feel like with a Saturn Neptune square, it would be do as I say, not as I do, right? Like she's clearly a communist. She's clearly a communist. Her parents were communists. Her grandparents were communists. The red apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But she's married to the president of a bank in Mexico, and not an insignificant bank, right? I mean, to me, that's really how that's the communist wet dream. Just sleeping with the bankers, literally sleeping with the bankers. Uh, but I think that could backfire on her, right? With that Saturn Neptune square. So she has to come across in some ways as one of the people. And as a Cancer, it's, embedded in her sign. Look, this would be a pretty cool script for this person. Let's say, for instance, for whatever reason, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe she had a vision of Mary or something like that, or had this really powerful dream, and Jesus came to her and she's like, what the fuck? I'm Jewish. What are you doing here? Right. And she all of a sudden has this major life turning event and starts to become somebody different. I'm not saying it would happen, but there's a possibility with this chart that it could. Like if she was on the right side of Cancer, this could be a very effective person. Like on the right side of it, right? Like truly invested in the people and the water. Like if she wasn't a globalist and she was more of a localist, she could be really good, right? But she would need to completely flip her script in order to do that. And I don't think it's in her best interest to be a globalist. Not with this chart, not with the Saturn Neptune square, not at all. Not with the Venus Neptune square, because she can't live up to her promises. She can't do it. She'll overpromise. She also has that Mercury. So with the Mercury Pluto square, so Massie has it, right? We saw that. And again, somebody will dig for the answers until they get them. The other side of this with the Mercury Pluto square, and I'll even say this with Massie, is that sometimes you can make enemies by the things you say or the things you write with that Mercury Pluto square. People will remember it and they'll have a vendetta. That's like vendetta energy. So it works both ways. Mercury square Pluto is like the scalpel, and it just wants to keep digging and digging and digging. But on the other side, right, if you say something or do something that somebody else doesn't like, they will not forget it. And they will remind you of what you said and when you said it. So I think that could be a positive and a negative in her chart. But again, with Mercury squaring Chiron and Mercury squaring Jupiter, can she play fast and loose with the truth? I would say no, she can't. She can't. Can't do it. Not with the square with Chiron. Right? It's not, again, if she was I'll say it one more time. If she was a localist, absolutely. That square then takes on something completely different, right? Like she's willing to sacrifice. Because you get into Pisces, you're into sacrificial mode. Like she's willing to sacrifice something, for not the greater good in the sense that like a communitarian or the WF would have the greater good, but the greater good for like it's really even hard to say her own people. She was just born there. Like she really doesn't have any Mexican in her. Like it's really like Jewish down the line. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. But now that she's president, like now they kind of are her people. And whatever you think of the election, and apparently it was quite something. There were a lot of people who disappeared during the election. So she had a much easier time of winning. I think that this is a tricky chart. Really tricky chart. Mars Saturn square. You've got that in conjunct with Pluto, with Saturn, in conjunct with Uranus and the moon. She would be much better off if she ditched the fucking World Economic Forum and the World Bank and whatever, right? And just became like she's a much better nationalist than an internationalist. I'm on the record with that. If she was a nationalist, this woman would be very good. Like she could go down historically as being somebody who really cared about the people and the country, right? But if she goes the internationalist route or the globalist route, I think that that's where like a lot of the square action with her chart kicks in. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like she can take this path and even this path because she has some charisma. I don't really see it, right? But I think she has a little bit of charisma. Maybe when she waves or something. I don't know. Um, and even that Sun Pluto sextile, it's a really powerful sextile. Like you can't underestimate a Sun Pluto sextile. But she has all of this potential with Juno and Ceres and Vesta, and they're all in Cancer. And if she could just get down to the folk level and really represent Mexico and the Mexican people versus this international bullshit, she would be really good. But it's going to be very hard for her because she was raised on international bullshit. She went to international bullshit universities. She's peddling international bullshit programs, right? So when that happens, then she gets caught up in the red. Literally, she gets caught up in the red, and she's got all these inconjuncts that I think are really problematic. They're like landmines. Neptune in conjunct Mercury, being caught in lies. Saturn in conjunct Pluto. Wow. Well, what happens if you piss off the wrong master? Yeah, you'll pay for that. Jupiter, what do we have here? Moon in conjunct Uranus. Uh, Unstable family, right? Unstable family. What happens if her newly married bank president and husband from November says, "Fuck, I'm out of here." I thought I was a good globalist. This shit is crazy. No, I'm out, right? That would upset the balance of things, I think, on some level. So and even this moon sun square, like that's not an easy square. And if it's in Aries, it feels much more warlike in a lot of ways. I mean, this is somebody who could actually be at war with themselves with the Sun Moon Square, whether it's at 29 Pisces or 1 or 2 Aries. She's still at war with herself. Um, I think it's harder if the moon is in Aries because Cancer here theoretically should have a much softer touch. But let's say we move this moon up by 1 or 2 degrees. That's the kind of moon where she would have to prove herself. Like she'd have to prove how tough she is. Like, I'll show you. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's where that would go. I don't like Mars in her chart at all. I don't. The Mars Saturn square is okay. Mars is in its detriment in Taurus. It's an accidental detriment in the eighth house. So, no, actually, no, I take that back. It'd be accidental detriment in the second house. So it's actually in kind of in its own house there because Mars used to be associated with Scorpio. But I don't like I guess the Mars Saturn square can build character, I guess, right? But if you throw the Mars Uranus square in there, no. It's really very disruptive. And if she made a deal with somebody like behind the scenes and she doesn't keep her end of the bargain, not good, right? Like there's a lot of talk that the cartels were behind her getting elected. Well, I could see that with this Neptune Mars opposition, right? What do we know about Neptune? Neptune's drugs. It's drugs. Clearly, even if it's not that obvious, Neptune obfuscates like how she channels her energy and her will. Completely obfuscates it. So I'll just go back again in one more time. If she could somehow turn a corner and become a nationalist and really care about those people, completely unlocks this chart. And it becomes a very different chart. And I'll say it again, if she went down that path, she could become one of the greatest leaders in Mexico's history. But if she doesn't go down that path, if she stays on the internationalist path, all the red, all the squares, all the inconjuncts will kick in and pop up. She will not have an easy time of it. Now, I took Mexico's chart because Mexico does have a chart. And I put her chart with Mexico's chart. All right. So, Mexico is on the inside. Mexico was founded September 16th, 1810 at 5:10 a.m. in Guanajuato. Right? So this is so Mexico is a double Virgo country. Isn't that interesting? And then right above it, California is a Virgo state. So you got Virgo basically running all the way up to Oregon, and you run into Oregon, which is Aquarian, and they're all nutty up there in a good way. Very interesting that it's a Virgo country, double Virgo at that. It's like 5:10 a.m. Let's go. We got business to do. Let's sign that document, right? I think it's pretty powerful. Yeah, the other thing that's interesting about Mexico is that there are a lot of healing centers in Mexico. A lot of healing centers, which to me is very Virgoan. So you got, places where you go to beat cancer, and there are a lot of alternative cancer treatment centers in Mexico. Mexico's true node happens to be in the sign of Libra, right? Right there. Libra. So yeah. Come see, come sa. Que sera, sera. Right? Manana, manana. No, I mean, so Mexico's beautiful. And there is an aesthetic with Mexico, a lovely aesthetic. One that is functional and earthy, right? Which is Virgo, but also very stylish too at the same time. So Mexico's role in the world is to contribute beauty and harmony. That's the role of the country. To be diplomatic, and it's really heavy with that South Node in Aries, and you have all this violence in Mexico. And that's really not where they're supposed to be. This is supposed to be a country that's at peace with itself and has a fair and balanced system for everybody. Her moon is right off the coast of the South Node, right there. So even if we put it at little Aries, maybe one or two Aries, hanging out right there, even at 29 Pisces, it's conjuncted to that South Node. Right. So it's kind of interesting that she's connected to violence and kind of, martial law or martial rule. And what I guess Maya was talking about, how it's been really like violent over the last few days in Mexico. Can we make a case that her moon is, maybe connected to this somehow? If not directly, then indirectly. Mexico has Pluto on the descendant, which I think is interesting. When I think of Pluto on the descendant, I think of Melvin Belli, who is the one of the famous American lawyers, and he took his fiance girlfriend down to Mexico to get married, and when he divorced her in the United States, and she came after him for all this money. And he said, No, I married you in Mexico. Those laws don't apply to our marriage. Right? And he actually won. Like Melvin Belli was so fucking sneaky that he knew if he got married in Mexico, he never needed to get a divorce. She wouldn't get a cent. And I know that's not like Pluto in the seventh house, but that's what it reminds me of. So what else is Mexico? Mercury in Libra, right? I think it's interesting that Mexico is a country that doesn't go to war. Now, they may have wars inside of Mexico, gang versus gang or gang versus people or but they don't go to war with other people. They don't go to war with other countries. They have been to war with another country, at least, like we're not counting drug war, but physical war for a very long time. A lot, there's some Libra here, right? Can we all get along? Mercury in the second house, in Libra. In terms of things like products, right? Art, um, what pottery, paintings, very much like Mercury, second house, Libra. And then we get into this Venus Uranus conjunction in Scorpio in the chart. So finally we hit, like the serpent, the serpent and the eagle. And now we've come into the serpent territory with Mexico, which is again theoretically kind of alchemical, right? And what does it do? Well, it squares Chiron in Aries. I'm sorry, Aquarius. In Aquarius, theoretically is the eagle, right? And Scorpio is the serpent. So this is the alchemical equation for Mexico. And what's interesting is that her Neptune is right on Venus here, right? So again, when we think of Neptune, we think of Scorpio, we think of the underworld. And so she has connections here with her Neptune. And again, Venus Uranus conjunction, radical, socialistic, communistic in some ways, unusual relationships, can vary from very decadent to also very traditional. What else does Mexico have? Moon in Taurus, nice placement. Although, again, this is in detriment here, better down in the second house. Yeah, Moon in Taurus. I think, yeah, earthy, right? Maternal. And then Jupiter up here in the ninth house in Gemini for Mexico. And I think obviously it's a big tourist destination. So a lot of people come to Mexico to hang out and play. Now, this woman, if we just take her chart and I've got some more to say about Saturn in a second. She's got her Mercury right on Mexico's midheaven. Right? Look at that. Her Mercury is placed. So she is now the spokesperson for this country. Whether you like it or not, our friends in Mexico, this is your voice now with her Mercury here. And again, when I rectified her chart, I was playing with, what was the equivalent of Virgo rising? Well, guess what? Mexico is a Virgo rising. So it does place her sun in the 10th house. Interesting, right? So whether or not that's her chart, this is kind of now her chart. We're almost dogtailing her chart through Mexico's chart. Venus, true node, 11th house. What's interesting here is that in the Mexico's 11th house, we have Venus and Pallas, right? I'm sorry, Ceres and Pallas, 11th house, and in Leo. So go to Mexico, have a good time, bring your friends. Mexico has Mars in the 12th house in Leo. That's hidden enemies, right? So whoever's in power in Mexico always has to watch out for that fucking Mars. Always. And her Uranus is connected right into that Mars. I would say this woman's kind of jacked in to this chart, right? So This is a really interesting question about astrology and politics. So even though they may have thrown this election, I've been through her Twitter feed. Every other tweet is El Frado or something like that. One could make a case that she has the chart to be elected, right? Just based on the astrology. Whether or not this is a really interesting kind of philosophical question. That with all of the quote unquote deaths, like how does somebody who is representing 2% of the population, let's be honest, how does she get elected? Well, maybe it's her chart. Maybe that's what we're seeing, right? This is the synastry chart. And here's her Jupiter, Pluto. She's got resources. Somebody is paying this woman, right? She is tapped into a partnership with very deep pockets, extremely deep pockets. When I see Saturn here, like on the IC, to me, this feels a lot like, especially in Sagittarius, like the families of the Europeans that settled in Mexico and have been running Mexico ever since. She's a European, kind of. Her family's from Lithuania. It's kind of, it's sort of in between Europe and Russia, right? But this is what I see with Mexico. You get this, right? These are the old families with Saturn here, and they came from another place. And there's kind of a shape-shifting thing, right? Like they may look like communists, right? But they're really coming from like a colonial line of people that have been running the country for a long time. And there may have been some people along the way that may have. I'm not an expert on the El Presidentes of Mexico, right? But I would say that based on this chart with Saturn here, those are the people that have been running the country for a very long time. And, again, obfuscating the fact with Neptune here. Now that's her Pluto right here in Mexico's 10th house. Again, that's kind of interesting, right? She's dealing with here's what I think she's going to do. And I talked about this with Russ on Friday, and this makes a lot of sense here. I think she's going to cut back on oil production in Mexico. That's what I think. She's a Green New Dealer, and you can see this right with Pluto squaring Saturn and squaring Neptune. Neptune is petroleum, man. Right? Anytime you get into Neptune, you're a petroleum world, gas, oil, right? And her Pluto is coming in and squaring off against that, squaring off against it. Now we see Pluto over here. Oh, got a Pluto opposition. Oh, that's interesting. Very interesting. I wonder if she'll be taken out with a Pluto. She better be careful with those cartels. She better be careful. I would say, in summing all of this up, right? She's got a chart to run this country. I hate to say it. I really do. I wish I could be wrong about it, right? But this is where, weirdly enough, I think the astrology prevails. Whether or not she's going to be a good leader, that depends on her. I think if she's down with the people and she's down with Mexico, if she's more of a nationalist and a globalist, it'll work out. She doesn't, I don't think it's going to go well. And clearly, she's showing us her cards very early on in her appointment. All right. So what did we start at 7? We've been going for 3 hours plus a bit of a disruption. All right. Why don't we call it a night? For everybody that's still here, thank you for being here and putting up with a bit of the power loss in between. I will next Sunday. I'll try to do a show next Sunday. A lot of it depends on when I get back because we'll be traveling. If we leave early, we might be able to get back and I'll be able to do a show. Let's just book it. We'll book it. So I'll see you guys next Sunday night here. Don't forget our sponsor, True Hemp Science. Please go there. Check out Chris's stuff. It's all good, especially the sleep gummies. I'm going to pop a few tonight. I'm a little wired. And you type in 15MINS, and guess what? You'll get a free goodie bag when you spend $100 or more. It's always a great deal. And if you spend $150 more, you get a free discount. Well, no, free shipping. Free shipping. That is a discount. And then there's always a 30-day money back guarantee. TrueHempScience.com. 15MINS. Indulge yourself. And guess what? You can talk to Chris as well and get his tips on what is the best CBD product, especially for you. Did you know that they have CBD for pets as well? They do. Come join Locals. We're having some fun over there. And you can support the show by becoming a supporting member and picking up on some of the content. Like I did a 2-hour special yesterday for our Locals group, and I'll be doing more. So come on over there, support the show. If you want to, you can buy me a cup of coffee. There's a link for that as well. And I am a working astrologer, so feel free to avail yourself of my services. Look for me and David on Tuesday night. It should be an incendiary show. One for the ages. The first one we did was epic. It was fucking epic. I think this one's going to be close. Thanks for being here, everybody. Much love to you all. God bless you all. And take care.